What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Tremendous episode for you today to take you into your weekend. It is a summer edition of the Next Pats podcast. That's right. We'll have several of these over the next coming weeks to help keep you satiated as time goes by, as we wait for training camp to begin for the New England Patriots here in Foxborough on July 23rd. And what we'll be talking about today is the quarterback situation that is evolving here in New England. What kind of position are your New England Patriots putting their young quarterback into as he goes into a critical year two? And to do that, we're going to start a bit of a series. We're going to take a look at the 3 Ps. We're going to steal from one of our friends, the Move the Sticks podcast. Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, both friends of the podcast, both tremendous guests, guys we love because we love their insight, we love their intel, and we love their way of breaking things down in a game that can be incredibly complicated, overcomplicated in times. But they can break it down into terms that we all can understand. And one of my favorite elements that they use on the Move the Sticks podcast is their 3 Ps when they talk about young quarterbacks and the situations those young quarterbacks are living in. Play callers, playmakers, and protection. If you can look at those 3 things and feel good about it, then you should feel good about the spot your young quarterback is in. Hasn't been great here for quarterbacks, going back now several years. Mac Jones, the situation wasn't ideal. Good play caller. Okay protection at times in 2021. Playmakers, very average. And if we're being honest, below average. Drake May last year, I think you could say below average across the board, quite frankly. And so where are things now? Because we know this roster has changed a great deal. We know the coaching staff has changed a great deal. And so let's try to figure this out. And so what we'll do is we'll give everyone a score, everyone across the league a score in all 3 of those P categories. We'll add them up at the end. We will tabulate them at the end, and we will determine who in the league has the best situation for quarterbacks and where the Patriots reside somewhere between 1 and 32. It's probably not going to be 1. Is it going to be 32? I don't think it'll be there either. But this will be a fun exercise for us to go through. And today, what we will be doing on the podcast today is starting by ranking playmakers across the league. Wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. Now, we are looking at these positions as a group, but we are trying not to, as best we can, we are trying not to factor in who the quarterbacks are for these players. We are trying not to factor in who the play callers are for these players. And even the offensive lines. If there's a running back, say, in one situation, and is he truly as good as we think he is, or is it because he's running behind an amazing offensive line? That, in theory, is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to isolate the weapons, the playmakers, team by team, all the way down, 1 through 32, and we've come up with tiers. Before we get into our tiers, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different tiers as we go through these 32 teams. Before we get into the rankings, I want to give you my overarching thoughts on the Patriots group of weapons, because I do feel as though they have improved from last year. They had to. They really had nowhere to go but up. And I like the 2 primary additions they've made this past offseason. I like them. Kyle Williams out of Washington State was a player we talked about before the draft. Was he my first pick in the 3rd round for the Patriots? No, I would have even taken a player in the 2nd round who ended up being available when the Patriots drafted Kyle Williams, and that would have been Jalen Knoll. We'll see how he does in Houston. But I liked Kyle Williams. The ability to separate off the line of scrimmage, real speed there to use on the outside. He's a little undersized. Hands are a little small. Dealt with some concentration drops at times as a collegian. Route running could use some polish. But boy, he seems like a tough individual, both mentally and physically, which is something that locker room could use in Foxborough. And I liked the addition of Stefon Diggs. Did I love it? I think the Patriots, by their actions, would tell you he wasn't their first choice. Right? They made runs at everybody from Chris Godwin to DK Metcalf in pursuit of a game-changing receiver in his prime who would give the Patriots something they don't have. In Stefon Diggs, obviously he's banged up the same way Godwin is, and they were willing to make Godwin an incredibly wealthy man. But he is banged up. He's going to be 32 years old this season, and he is what he is in terms of his skill set now, right? Which is still effective. He certainly was effective for the Houston Texans before getting injured last year, but he's not that outside the numbers, threaten the safety kind of player that he used to be. He's probably more of a slot option, more of an interior option, even if you do think you could move him around a bit just because of his route running savvy, and if he can regain some of the explosiveness that maybe he lost by injuring his knee and suffering that torn ACL last year. You know, there are things that he does as a route runner. I've talked to scouts and coaches about Diggs, and you know, one term that comes up that fascinates me is stride length. Great stride length, and the way he comes off the line of scrimmage, he's like a great pitcher. If you follow baseball and how these pitchers tunnel their different pitches so that the fastball looks like the changeup, which looks like the slider, and the ability to just completely mess with hitters' minds because everything looks identical. Diggs can do that as a route runner. That's what he did at his best. And so is this guy about to run right by me? Is he about to break this off and take it to the sideline? Is he about to take it to the middle of the field on a dig? I can't get a tell on Diggs as a receiver because he is so efficient and he is so all out, really, in terms of trying to get on the toes of a defensive back and force him to make decisions that he might regret moments later. So a good decision by the Patriots to bring on that kind of talent. To me, though, someone that we have to wait and see on in terms of whether or not he can be the game-changing type of receiver that they really need. I get the sense that people are assuming, based on what we've seen on Instagram videos and based on what we saw in terms of his ability to move around this spring in Foxborough. And I'll give him credit. He's moving better than I assumed he would 7 months after tearing his ACL. But I'm going to wait on assuming that he's going to hit his, for example, per game numbers that he hit last year in Houston. I'm going to wait before I'm assuming he's going to give the Patriots anything close to what he gave Buffalo or Minnesota. Because the history of players coming off of this injury at this position, generally speaking, does not yield amazing production a year later. That's just the recent history. Now, here in New England, you as Patriots fans have had the opportunity to see two of the best ACL recoveries of all time at the receiver position. Wes Welker in 2010 after tearing his ACL at the end of 2009, and then somehow coming back in 2010 at 29 years old to play 15 games, catch 86 passes for 848 yards and 7 touchdowns. Julian Edelman in 2018, similarly impressive. Tore his ACL, you'll remember. In the preseason, 2017, I'll never forget being in Detroit and watching Julian Edelman make an incredibly aggressive jump cut after winning the Super Bowl, obviously at the end of 2016, playing a massive role there, and his knee goes on him. The last thing anybody that follows the Patriots wanted to see, or anybody who just simply enjoyed watching Julian Edelman do his job, wanted to see. So he missed the entirety of the 2017 season. Then at 32, he comes back to play 12 games. You'll remember he was suspended the first 4 games of the regular season in 2018 for using performance-enhancing drugs, but came back in 12 games, caught 74 passes for 850 yards and 6 touchdowns. Helped them win another Super Bowl, won MVP of that Super Bowl. Again, 2 of the greatest bounce-back seasons for a receiver coming off an ACL injury that I think we'll ever see. And there are others that we won't mention here, but I wanted to mention those 2 because those 2 are still, if you're a New England person, fresh in your minds. Those are the outliers. I'll go back and I'll list for you now because I think this is important. Again, before we're getting into our rankings, I promise. You came here for rankings, you're going to get your rankings. Nobody likes a list more than me. But before we get to the Patriots ranking, I just want to explain to you why I have them where I have them, because Stefon Diggs is so critical to that ranking. And how you perceive what Stefon Diggs can be will drastically impact where you'd be willing to rank them doing a list like this league-wide. And I'm telling you why I'm going to be tentative in my projections for Stefon Diggs. Because unlike Julian Edelman and Wes Welker, even though those guys were similar ages to where Diggs is now at 31, about to be 32 in November, those two players, Welker and Edelman, had developed next-level chemistry with the greatest quarterback we've ever seen play. And so when they came back, I'm sure they had to deal with various hiccups, physically, mentally, that impacted their ability to be the guys they were used to being on the field. But when you play with Tom Brady and you play the position they played and you have the relationship that you have with that guy behind center, you're going to produce. Stefon Diggs doesn't have that. And he won't. And I don't know how he could at all this coming season. He's just not going to get to that level of being able to be on the exact same wavelength that those guys were with Brady. It doesn't mean he can't develop a great relationship with Drake May and really have a good understanding of this offense eventually as they get reps together. But let's remember, Stefon Diggs was limited in the spring. They did not take a competitive 11-on-11 rep together in the same offensive huddle. Right? So we saw a mandatory minicamp. We saw a series of OTAs. Stefon Diggs was out there for a number of different types of 11-on-11 situations, but the competitive ones, he wasn't out there. So that's something they're going to have to work on. That is one element to Diggs' projection that is working against him. He's working with a new quarterback and a relatively new offense. I'll give him some credit that he has some experience with Brian Daboll, and so the language might be a little bit easier for him to pick up. But even he acknowledged after mandatory minicamp that he needed to get in the playbook these next 5 months between the end of minicamp and the start of training camp to be able to figure it out and learn what Josh McDaniels, who's very demanding of his receivers, was going to ask of him. So this ain't Edelman, this ain't Welker. You know, you could look at his career to this point and their careers leading up to their ACL injuries. Diggs is one of the best of his era. This is not a slight against Diggs and what he's done in his resume. But the situations just aren't the same. There's a lot of new happening for Stefon Diggs, including coming off of a new injury for him. Now, in terms of the recent history of receivers coming off of torn ACLs and their varying levels of success, I want to give you a bunch of examples here. This is over the course of the last 6 years. I found notable receivers who had torn ACLs and then figured out what they were able to produce the following season. Cortland Sutton tore his ACL in 2020. The next year, he comes back 26 years old. Okay, so 5-6 years younger than Stefon Diggs. He played in 17 games, 58 catches, 776 yards. Pretty damn good. But again, significantly younger than Stefon Diggs is now. Odell Beckham tore his ACL in 2020. In 2021, he comes back, 14 games, 44 catches, 537 yards at 28 years old. George Pickens tore his ACL in 2021. In 2022, plays in 17 games, 52 catches, 801 yards. Really young player. But if Stefon Diggs can get to that level, boy, that is a slam dunk success story. Here's one of the most relevant examples to me. Robert Woods tears his ACL in 2021. In 2022, at 30 years old, and he tore his ACL in November of 2021. So right around the same time Diggs tore his ACL in 2024. He comes back. He's ready for the start of the season. Plays 17 games, 53 catches, 527 yards in 2022 at 30 years old. I think that is an incredibly pertinent example, so let's keep that one in mind. Chris Godwin. This is probably the best example of a player coming off a torn ACL. Tears it in 2021. In 2022, at 26 years old, he plays in 15 games, 104 catches, 1,023 yards. Michael Gallup tears his in 2022. The next year he comes back, 17 games, 34 catches, 418 yards. Odell Beckham tears his again at the end of 2021. Doesn't play in 2022. Comes back in 2023. 35 catches in 14 games for 565 yards. And we have to mention Kendrick Bourne in 2023. Again, I think pertinent because he tore his almost to the day a year before Stefon Diggs suffered his injury. Comes back and plays 12 games last year, 28 catches, 305 yards at 29 years old. Again, I think a pretty pertinent example just because of the age factor. Diggs is 31 now. Again, he'll be 32 in November. So the recent history of receivers coming off this injury and being true number one types, if that's what you're hoping in your heart of hearts, if that's what you really hope Stefon Diggs can be, we have one example of that in the last 6 years, and it's Chris Godwin. Outside of that, the best seasons we have seen, Pickens in 22, Sutton in 2021, you're talking 700, 800-ish yard seasons. Those were submitted by players who are 5, 6, 7 years younger than Stefon Diggs. So this is important to keep in mind. This is still, even though it is not the career ender it used to be, for players at this position, it can be a significant injury to try to work your way back from. And so that's why it's hard for me to look at Diggs and say, well, he could give you 1,000 yards. If he gets back to what he was before the injury in Houston, you want to make that argument? I won't begrudge it because I don't know. I don't know how any of us know. And an excellent point for you to make on that side of the argument, if you're higher on Diggs than I am, in terms of what your expectations are, would be this. Perry, Stefon Diggs, not sure if you knew this, he's a better player than George Pickens. He's a better player than Michael Gallup. Why are you even bringing up Michael Gallup? He's a better player than Robert Woods. You say that's an incredible example because of the age. Robert Woods at 30 years old. He comes off a torn ACL, 50 catches, 53 catches, 527 yards. Robert Woods ain't Stefon Diggs. And you're right. You would be right to make that argument. I just can't sit here and say that he's going to be Julian Edelman either in 2018, 850 yards. So you don't think he's Woods. I don't think he's Edelman. Even if he's somewhere between those, you're talking maybe 650 yards. And I'm not saying that's my projection for him. I don't have a yard-specific projection. But if we're being realistic, at his age coming off this injury, given the history of this injury, for guys at this position, 600, 650, 700 might be getting a little greedy. But if that's what you end up getting from Diggs in a full season, is that enough to elevate this group of weapons around Drake May to be even league average? On paper, I think it sounds okay, right? Okay, if you can get 650 yards from Stefon Diggs and you get another 600, you got 600 plus from Pop Douglas last year. Who's to say he doesn't get to 750 with Josh McDaniels? He knows how to use that slot position. Another year in the league. Offense that might better leverage his skill set. Okay, now you've got I would say 2 twos on your hands in Diggs and Douglas. You have a rock-solid tight end in Hunter Henry. You have what I would say is a pretty strong running back group between Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson and Travion Henderson. I think if you compared that unit to other units across the league, you'd still come away feeling as though the Patriots are less than. Just when you're focused on the weapons alone, right? We're going to rattle off some teams here for you. Try to imagine these teams with Drake May, these groups of weapons with Drake May, with Josh McDaniels, with a average offensive line. Just try to picture it that way. And I think even if Diggs gives you something representative, and you do get improvement from Pop Douglas, and maybe Kyle Williams does flash more than the average third-round receiver does as a rookie, it goes without saying that a lot of these teams and these units of weapons are going to be units you would prefer. Boy, that was a hell of a buildup. And you know why? because you're not going to be all that thrilled to hear where the Patriots are. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you don't. Let's all keep an open mind about this. Nobody knows anything, right? Nobody knows anything when it comes to what's going to happen in 2025. Too many things can happen. Jumps in production we didn't anticipate. Injuries we didn't anticipate. And this isn't just for the Patriots. It's for every team across the league. But this is where I have the tiers of weapons across the NFL for right now, and you will hear how the Patriots slot in. Ready? I'm ready. Let's buckle up. Tier number 1, reigning studs. Pretty self-explanatory. Eagles are number 1 overall. Then you've got the Bucs with Evans and Godwin. Godwin needs to come back from the injury, obviously. Emeka Ibuka, Bucky Irving, really like that unit. The Bengals are number 3 with their 2 wideouts, and they really don't have a whole heck of a lot else, but those 2 wideouts are so good, they deserve to be in the top 5. Then you have the Vikings, led by Justin Jefferson, of course, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, still a very, 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 in my opinion, good group. And I have the Lions checking in at 5th overall, led by Amon-Ra St. Brown and that fantastic running game. Our second tier, this is our bet the over tier. 6 overall is the Miami Dolphins. You could probably mix up all of these teams within this tier any way you want, and it would be hard for me to argue. But when Tyreek Hill is motivated and engaged, and I don't know if that's what he's going to be this year. I don't know if he wants to play for the Miami Dolphins, quite frankly, this year. It's very hard to project where this guy's head is at any time. But when he's on, to me, he is still excellent. In between Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, even Jonnu Smith had an electric season last season at the tight end position. That is a very, very good group of weapons. And with a little different quarterback, boy, I think they'd be viewed even better than they are. Number 7, Baltimore Ravens. Really like some of the quote-unquote secondary types of positions within the weapons group. Obviously, Derrick Henry, but Mark Andrews, to me, still one of the best tight ends in football, even though he couldn't figure out his fumbling issues at the end of last year. And then I think at receiver, they're deep enough, certainly, to give you problems. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, close to the end, but still can give you something. I like that group at 7. At 8, I have the Bears, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Colston Loveland, and Luther Burden III. A couple of rookies there, but guys who I think have a lot of promise. Loveland especially. Burden, incredibly talented. I'm very fascinated to see how he works out as a pro. That is not a player that I would have been in on if I was the Patriots, but the talent is there, clearly, and if they can get it out of him, that will end up looking like an excellent pick. At number 9, I've got the Rams. This is the last of the bet the over crew. Puka Nacua leading the receiver group. Devontae Adams. You might not find a better number 2 in football. Kyron Williams and Tyler Higbee sort of rounding that group out, but that group obviously led by its 2 receivers. I think Devontae Adams still has plenty left in the tank. Put up big-time numbers. I know Aaron Rodgers was feeding him last year, but put up big-time numbers in a bad offense with pretty bad quarterback play, let's face it, last year for the Jets. Our third tier, this is our stargazing tier, because this group of teams, there's 4 teams here, I think they've all got stars, and most of them have 2. But that's really kind of where it ends. These teams were sort of separated from the rest of the crop because they have 2, in my opinion, headlining types that can kind of carry an offense. And maybe they aren't so good that they can get to that bet the over tier, but I still really like these offenses. You could certainly win with these groups of weapons for sure. I've got the Niners at 10. I'm still giving a lot of respect to Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, and I know they've been banged up, and they are probably both, speaking of Devontae Adams, closer to the end. And DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is who I said that about. Closer to the end than the beginning, but can still really help carry an offense, in my opinion, when they're on the field. Brandon Ayuk, I'd love to see another year removed from the injury. And Ricky Pearsall, I know he's been banged up too, but former first-round pick. Really interested to see what Kyle Shanahan can get out of him this season. The Falcons checking in at 11. This is a good little group right here, because any group led by Drake London and Bijan Robinson, that's going to be top half of the NFL. It just is. I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of Kyle Pitts, not a huge fan of Darnell Mooney. Doesn't really matter. They have 2 studs at different positions, and they're not to the Chase Higgins level, but 2 very good players that deserve to put them at 11 overall, in my opinion. Then I've got the Cowboys because you have CeeDee Lamb, you have George Pickens. I'm incredibly interested to see how George Pickens is able to produce when he's not the best receiver on his own team. Another guy, hard to predict what's going on in the old cranium from week to week. But I think in Dallas, with a more than capable quarterback, CeeDee Lamb, like that could be fireworks there. And then I've got the Jags at 13 overall because I am a huge fan, and I think he is a star, of Brian Thomas. And if you listen to this podcast, you know what a fan I am of Travis Hunter. And I think he's going to produce in a big way right away for them. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'll have egg on my face, as will the Jaguars for giving up all they gave up to make sure they could go get him. Travis Etienne, it doesn't do a whole lot for me, but not a bad option to have as sort of your third option in the passing. That's really what I'm thinking about most. I think running game is a factor here. That'll actually probably come into play more so when we talk about the offensive lines. We talk about protection in our third installment of this series when we're talking about quarterback situations. But that's the end of our stargazing tier, the Jacksonville Jaguars. This next tier, right in the middle, still no Patriots. But this is the deep enough to scare you tier. Because I think when you look at the breadth of talent in all of these rooms, it is really intriguing. I'm starting with the Colts. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, rookie Tyler Warren, who I'm a big fan of. We talked about him here. You know, my buddy Tom Curran is a huge fan of Tyler Warren's. And Jonathan Taylor still at running back. I think they've got a number of weapons there, and unfortunately they will not be used correctly because they don't have the proper quarterback play. But the talent is what it is. 14 overall for Indianapolis. Then I have, staying the AFC South, the Houston Texans. Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, the two rookies from Iowa State, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, Joe Mixon at running back. That is a rock-solid group, deep enough to scare you. Nico Collins, to me, is a true one. After that, a little bit of a melange in terms of the types of talent they have, but they have enough in the way of options there that Nick Caley, the new offensive coordinator there, obviously has some roots here in New England, has plenty to work with. Then I've got Washington at 16 overall. This one's really led by Terry McLaurin, and I love the guy. I think he's one of the best receivers in football. Deebo Samuel, can you get more out of him? Zach Ertz, can you squeeze anything out of that guy? He's still left and will be playing some tight end in Washington this year. It is a good, not great group, and I think that's what most of these teams in this tier are right now. Kansas City at 17, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, disappointing to me. Not sure what he's ever going to become. Travis Kelce, on the back end of his career, is he that guy that you can really depend on every single third down anymore? I still like Isaiah Pacheco and how hard he runs, but they don't deserve, in my opinion, to really be any higher than right in the middle of the league there at 17. 18, I've got the Bills. So you got two Super Bowl aspirants. They're really technically bottom half of the league. And you can get away with it because the quarterbacks are so good. But again, we're not factoring in quarterback play. This is Khalil Shakir, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, good running back there. Keon Coleman, can they get more out of him? They need to. They need to if they want to elevate into a different tier for this exercise, and I think improve their chances of actually winning at the highest level. Then I've got the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison, who to me was disappointing last year based on all the hype, and we'll see what he's able to become. He looks like he got yoked in the offseason. Just looking at some of the photos that are coming out of Arizona, I don't know if that's a good thing. To me, I would have been focusing on maybe getting a little faster, maybe being able to create a little bit more separation, but that's just me. Trey McBride, one of the best pass-catching tight ends in football. James Conner, I still think is a rock-solid option at running back, so they're there at 19. These are all pretty good off. So we've gone through 19 teams here, and I think if you're being honest with yourself, there's not a single team on here that I've listed off that you could say, oh, the Patriots have something better. Let's keep going. This next tier, kind of frisky on paper. That's what we're calling this tier. Number 20 overall, the Packers. Again, just a nice spread of talent. Nothing that's necessarily going to blow you out of the water here in Green Bay. But first-round rookie in Matthew Golden. You have Jaden Reed. You still have Christian Watson there if you're a believer in him, but he's always banged up. Josh Jacobs at running back. Tucker Kraft at tight end. These guys are good players. But just kind of frisky. They're not really deep enough to scare you. Is anybody facing off? Is there a defensive coordinator in football who's got the Packers on the schedule and they say, oh, bleep, we got to deal with these guys this week? I don't think so, but they're frisky enough to do some damage if you let them. Next on the list, the Vegas Raiders. This receiver group, I think, is lacking, even though our good friend of the podcast, Jacoby Myers, is leading the way there. A great 2 or 3. A great 3, a good 2 is what I would say Jacoby Myers is at this stage. He's their number 1, de facto 1. Jack Betch got some promise, not necessarily bringing a whole lot of juice to that receiver core in terms of his speed, but a great young back in Ashton Genty, I think, and I know a great young tight end in Brock Bowers. The Broncos are next at 22. Cortland Sutton, the aforementioned Cortland Sutton, 1,000-yard season last season. That guy's back. He's a really good player. Marvin Mims, they figured out how to use him. They've added Evan Ingram, R.J. Harvey, J.K. Dobbins at the running back position. So some new additions there that should make them even better than they were last year with second-year quarterback Bo Nix. The Saints are at 23. This one's a little bit of a dart throw. You're hoping you get a healthy Chris Olave, a healthy Rashid Shaheed, a still good, still strong, still with plenty of juice, Alvin Kamara, and Brandon Cooks back in New Orleans. We'll see what he can give them. But you can see we're thinning out now. We are thinning out now. The Jets are next on my list. They do not have much, friends. But they have, in my opinion, one of the best receivers in football in Garrett Wilson. And I really like what they have in that running back room. To me, still led by Breece Hall. Boy, no idea what they've got outside of Wilson at receiver. Josh Reynolds, Al Lazard. They're not scaring anybody. Rookie tight end Mason Taylor, to me, is intriguing enough to get them into this kind of frisky on paper tier. Okay, we're into our bottom 8. You still haven't heard the Patriots listed. This next tier is called Can't Be Trusted. Can't be trusted. And yes, there's still one tier left after that. Seattle Seahawks, 25. Can't trust them. Jackson Smith and Jigba, love them. Cooper Kupp, how do we feel? Yeah, he tore the Patriots apart last year. There's no question. And I wouldn't put it past the guy that he is grinding to such a degree this offseason that he's ready to regain and recapture whatever he has left to pour it all on the field for Seattle. But he is where he is in terms of this stage of his career. Kenneth Walker, I still like. It's a fine group. It's not a loaded group by any stretch. And I think more often than not, they're going to be going into games on a weekly basis and have the lesser of the weapons. The Giants are next. Again, this whole list, essentially, this whole tier is basically a series of what I would call high-end receivers surrounded by almost nothing. The Giants with Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, not a great group, but they've got a great young receiver in Malik Neighbors. The Chargers are next at 27. Ladd McConkey, rookie Trey Harris, who I think is promising. We've talked about him plenty on this podcast, but let's see how that plays out. Omarion Hampton, really interesting running back. Let's see it again. Need to see it. Mike Williams, there's really just not a lot to this group right now outside of Ladd McConkey, but at least they have that guy. They have that dependable 1,000-yard type of receiver. Any critical situation, red zone, third down, 2-minute, he's going to be open and he's going to catch the football. Do the Patriots have that? Just so we're reminding ourselves of what matters in this exercise? I'm not sure, which is why you still haven't heard them. 28 overall, Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, one big-time receiver. Who the hell knows what else? DK Metcalf is their one. Pat Freiermuth is their tight end. I would say Hunter Henry's still somebody I would rather have than Freiermuth. Freiermuth a little bit younger, so maybe you're leaning towards him and saying, oh, he's going to grow and he's going to project into something a little bit better. Okay, maybe. Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. Calvin Austin at receiver. It's ugly there in Pittsburgh, and I think it's going to end up frustrating Aaron Rodgers because as bad as things were in New York last year, he had Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. He ain't got that in Pittsburgh. Get ready, Steelers fans. Final tier, at long last. We will wrap this up, and we will get into a mailbag. answer some of your questions before we get into the weekend here. At 29, I've got the Carolina Panthers. This is based in large part on projecting out that Ted McMillan, T-Mac as he likes to be called, will be something approximating a number one receiver. Receivers who are drafted as high as McMillan was this year, top 10 player. In recent years, generally speaking, those guys pan out. Last year, you had the trio of Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze. I think we saw more than enough from Neighbors. I think Odunze in year 2, he showed enough in year 1 to say, okay, this guy is eventually going to be a really, really good player in this league. Marvin Harrison, again, I'm still waiting. I think he was probably, in some ways, the most disappointing, maybe because he came in with the most hype. But let's not write any of those guys off just yet. Back in 2022, 2 top 10 receivers, Drake London and Garrett Wilson. Those guys have panned out. Back in 2021, 3 top 10 receivers, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. Those guys have panned out. Now, I'm not saying that Carolina's got everything figured out and, they're going to be, on the same level as some of these other teams in terms of the amount of success they experience with McMillan. But in today's NFL, I think teams have gotten smarter about scouting that position and when to use such a valuable pick on that position. And then once that guy gets there, you better believe he becomes a focal part of the offense. A focal point of the offense. So I am projecting here. Hand up, I am. Because I was not McMillan's biggest fan coming out of college, but he was drafted where he was drafted, and the NFL has a pretty decent track record the last few years picking these guys really early. And if he can give you anything close to what any of those other guys have given their teams, they probably deserve to, quite frankly, be in a different tier here just based on that selection alone. They also have Adam Thielen, would have been the best receiver on the Patriots last year. The guy just continues to tick as time moves on. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is a good, not great back. And Xavier Legette, to me, is somebody I believed in coming out of the draft 2 off seasons ago. And I think the addition of McMillan might actually allow him to experience more success because you could move him around a little bit more. You could play him out of the slot, give you sort of a physical mismatch on the inside. I'm not giving up on Xavier Legette just yet. 3, 2, 1. We're down to our final 3, and you still haven't heard the Patriots. You're going to have to wait a little longer. This was really difficult. I did ultimately end up putting the Browns just ever so slightly ahead of the New England Patriots in terms of their weapons. I give the Browns the slight edge at tight end because of David Njoku. Had an 800-yard season a couple seasons ago. You could say maybe Hunter Henry a little more dependable, very consistent over the last several years of his career. I think in terms of high-end athleticism and juice and playmaking ability, I think what Njoku did a couple years ago is indicative of what he has in him. So I'm giving him the ever so slight edge there at tight end. I'm giving the Patriots the ever so slight edge at running back. But I like the additions that the Browns have made. They drafted 2 rookies this year that I think are going to be really good. They drafted Travion Henderson's teammate, Quinshon Judkins. They also drafted Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. I think a fantastic plan on their part, quite frankly, as sort of the future 1-2 punch of that organization. Judkins is your between-the-tackles hammer in the same way they use these guys at Ohio State. He's your muscle. And at Ohio State, it was Travion Henderson, who was the do-it-all, catch it out of the backfield, take it to the house, a big explosive play threat type of player. Sampson, not quite as athletic as Henderson, but I think he could fill that kind of role as sort of the third down back there, the scat guy. But I still give the nod ever so slightly to the Patriots at running back. So now at receiver, the question is, to me, what do you value? And I think different people value different things. And if you want to put the Patriots at 30 and put the Browns at 31, have at it. This was, I thought about this, quite frankly, friends, for way too long. Just gives you a sense of where things are at on the NFL calendar right now. But I'm sitting here staring at my computer and staring at different projections and staring at ourlads.com. Thank you so much, ourlads.com. Just such an easy way to look at depth charts and what teams have available to them, just as we're refreshing and we're going through this part of the year. Teams are turning over, personnel's changing, et cetera, et cetera. The Browns have a sure thing at receiver. They do. In a way that the Patriots don't. They had a 90 reception, 1,200-yard season last season from Jerry Jeudy. Say what you will about Jerry Jeudy. I am not the world's biggest Jerry Jeudy fan. I thought he would be great coming out of Alabama. I thought the route running would be next level. And I think he's gotten better in that regard. It just never panned out that he would be the game-breaking type of receiver that many thought he would be when he's a first-round pick a few years ago. And even last season, if you go back and you look at his game log, I rattled off for you the gaudy overall numbers. 90 catches, 1,229 yards. He had a stretch in the middle of the season that was just absurd. 13 catches for 235 against Denver in a 41-32 loss in December. He had another 108 14-catch game in a 21-7 loss to the Chiefs. 94 yards in a 20-3 loss in Miami. So a lot of hollow numbers. 11 catches for 142 in mid-November against the Saints, a 35-14 loss. But at least you know he's going to be out there, and he has a skill set where you can just pump him the football and know you're going to get something. I still wouldn't call him a number one, even though those numbers would suggest he's a number one. What I would do is if you were stacking up all the receivers between the Browns and the Patriots, I'd put Jerry Jeudy at the top, and it wouldn't take me very long. Again, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, because of the reservations I have on Stefon Diggs coming back off of that injury at his age. Now, depth-wise, you want to tell me the Patriots are deeper at receiver? 100% agree. I would take the complement of Pop Douglas and Kendrick Bourne and Kyle Williams and Kayshon Boutte. I don't even know if all those guys are going to make the team. Like Boutte, Bourne, is one of those guys going to be on the bubble? Like, what ends up happening with Diggs in terms of his injury? Does he start the year on PUP? Let's see. Let's wait. Let's find out. But I would take whatever the Patriots have left over at receiver over whatever the Browns have left over at receiver, and it wouldn't take me that long to make that choice. Cedric Tillman doesn't do it for me. Deontay Johnson at this stage, 3 teams last year and barely did anything for 2 of them. Does nothing for me at this stage. I know he's put up numbers in the past. I'm not sure what he is anymore. So if you want to tell me the Patriots are deeper and therefore deserve to be ahead of them, and they deserve to be ahead of the Panthers because of that too, I think it's just all in the eye of the beholder. But to me, having the more solid, dependable go-to option, I think is more valuable. And then you fill out the rest of your roster with whatever you fill it out with. Most teams are going to end up filling it out with a bunch of 3s if all you have is one guy at the top. And the Patriots might be closer to having 2s and 3s. I just don't think whatever they have in terms of depth at wideout is so great that it should supersede what I think they have in Jeudy, which is a good, dependable receiver. And I'm not sure the Patriots have that just yet. Last on the list is the Tennessee Titans. Calvin Ridley, I like, would be the best receiver on the Patriots. After that, it's a pretty weak group. Not sure how much Tyler Lockett has left. I like Tony Pollard at running back, but it's a pretty thin group at that position as well. One injury I think would really hurt him. Chigakonkwo at tight end, to me, not on the level of somebody like Hunter Henry. So that's why I have the Patriots ahead of the Titans, just based on their depth. It's basically the Titans. It's Ridley and nothing else. And you could say, well, use that argument for the Steelers and the Chargers and the Giants. I think all those teams in that can't be trusted group, they have better secondary, even though it's not much, they have better secondary options than the Titans do. That puts them at the very bottom of the list. So as we go through the series, playmakers, play caller, protection, the 3 Ps. Not a great place to start when we're talking about the Patriots. If you have them at 31 overall, you might have them at 30. You might have them in the late 20s. It's still really not where you want to be when you have what you think is a promising young quarterback on that inexpensive rookie contract. This is the time. Now is the time to surround him with pieces, to try to help him out, to elevate him, to get him to whatever ceiling he is fated to reach. Whatever ceiling he's supposed to reach. That's what you should be attacking right now. And to their credit, they tried. I know they did. I know they went after DK Metcalf. He didn't want to sign with them long term. So they weren't going to give away a second-round pick for a guy that didn't want to be here. I know they went after Chris Godwin. Everyone knows they went after Chris Godwin. They tried to blow him out of the water. They did blow him out of the water with an offer. Millions and millions of dollars more than the Bucs were willing to give him. And yet he didn't want to be here. So they gave it the old college try. They're going to have to continue to try. And this is why when things come up, like Terry McLaurin's holding out in Washington and doesn't want to show up for spring workouts, and like, you have to pay attention and you have to be aggressive and you have to go after players like that. Because even though you have Stefon Diggs, even though you just drafted a guy you like in Kyle Williams, even though you have Pop Douglas and you think you might be able to get more out of him in the slot with Josh McDaniels, you need more. You very clearly need more. Because while the Patriots have improved, it's better than what we saw last year. It's better than what they had 2 years ago. You look at it relative to the rest of the league, and there just aren't many, if any, teams you would put below the New England Patriots in terms of dependability, high-end talent. You want to say depth? I think they've got NFL players all over the place. But you could say they've had NFL players all over the place for a while now, and it hasn't been enough. It's not enough. You need horses. You need big-time talent. You need people who can make plays. Not just take advantage of bad football. That's the bar. That's the first step to becoming competent. And it's what Mike Vrabel has brought up, and he's discussed it with his team. He discussed it at his first press conference. He said, I'm not sure we're good enough to take advantage of bad football right now. That's a really bad place to start. And they know it. It's why they pursued receivers so aggressively this offseason. And while getting there would represent a step in the right direction, it's still not enough. You need guys who can win one-on-one when the other guy executes, right? So good on good. Strong performance against strong performance. One guy getting the most out of his ability versus another guy getting the most out of his, and your guy wins. That's what you need. That's what the best teams in this league have. And that's why when we look at some of the best and most highly paid quarterbacks in football, it should come as no surprise that, outside of now the Chiefs and the Bills, who really are just kind of solid around their all-world quarterbacks, they weren't always that way. Those guys needed Stefon Diggs in his prime. Those guys needed Travis Kelce in his prime to help them get to where they have gotten to. And now they're at a place in their careers where, yeah, you could give them a little bit less. And you know what? You might get a little less out of them. Patrick Mahomes, God bless him. He's not working with much anymore. And you even have Rashee Rice last year. But his numbers just weren't the same. He wasn't as efficient. Josh Allen, you could very obviously make the argument that he still doesn't have quite enough. And they're close. They're getting there because those guys are spectacular. They're amazing. But eventually, it's going to come back around, and they're going to need more help. The way Tom Brady needed more help at the end of his career. Situations matter, guys. We're going to get into it when we get into our mailbag. Tom Carton and I have had a little back and forth over the last few days about Drake May and what we think he'll be in year 2. And I think he'll be better. I'm willing to make that leap now as opposed to Tom, because I look at the situation last year and say, it can't be worse. It just can't be worse. And situation matters. Tom Brady 2019 is the ultimate example. It's not that he had bad numbers, but they didn't win at a high level. Was that because Tom Brady wasn't a good quarterback anymore? Of course not. He goes down to Tampa Bay the next year. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and they win the Super Bowl. In the middle of a pandemic, a new offense, new coaching staff, new everything. The guy was still amazing. He just didn't have the horses around him to succeed the way he needed to succeed. It's not that difficult a formula to figure out. So that's why I push back when I hear people say, well, Drake May only won one game last year. Who knows what he's going to be? You have to go beyond that. It's not that simple. You can't, out of one side of your mouth, and I feel like everybody says it, so I'm gonna put it in everyone else's mouth because I feel the same way too. Football's the ultimate team sport. You can't feel that way and then attribute wins and losses solely to the guy playing quarterback. Sometimes it works out that the best quarterbacks win the most games. Tom Brady's a great example of that. Peyton Manning's a great example of that. But those guys had a lot of help. And when they didn't have the help they needed, they didn't win at a high level. So you need both. You need both. And to look at Drake May and to project him as something that he's not because he had one win next to his resume last year, to me is a faulty line of thinking. Now, that said, I can tell you he knows he needs to win more, or else he's going to continue to get criticized, continue to get crushed. And he did have some back-breaking mistakes last year, late in games, where, yeah, maybe they're never even in those spots if it's not for him in the first place. But those are what people remember. People remember the pick at the end of the Titans game. People remember the pick at the end of the Rams game, which his offensive coordinator later came out and said was the receiver's fault because he didn't run the right route. But I think the Patriots already have a player there at the game's most important position. They just aren't right now able to surround him with everything he needs to be surrounded by in order to have success at the highest level. So I think he'll be better, and I think the Patriots will be better as a result. Their group of weapons is better. It's still not, by any definition, above average. And I don't know how you could argue otherwise after going through this exercise. But if you want to, the comments are always open. They are always open, friends. You can always say, hey, no, we need to be in the deep enough to scare you tier, or the kind of frisky on paper tier. If you feel that way, please let me know. I will say this. When we do our additional installments, Playmaker, Play Caller and Protection, the Patriots will rank higher on those. So it'll be like golf. Low score wins, right? The Patriots won't have the low score, but they also won't be at 31 at the end of the day. They're going to be helped in a big way by their Play Caller ranking. I'm a believer in the Play Caller. I know some people don't. I'm a believer in the Play Caller. They will be helped by their Protection ranking, which will be better than 31. So let's see where they end up at the end of the day here. But fun exercise to go through. Not a fun ranking at the end of the day if you're a Patriots fan. But again, I think could lead to some good discussion, some good back and forth. So let's have it in the comments there. Let's get to some mailbag questions right now because we have some good ones here. I'm going to start with Kevin. He says, how has Bourne looked in camp? Good question, Kevin. We hear a lot of hype on certain players, but nothing on him. Curious if he'll make the cut. Also, do you think Polk could start the season on PUP? Polk's moving around pretty good to me. I guess it's possible that he would start on PUP. He really wasn't participating in these competitive 11-on-11s either, much like Stefon Diggs, but doing a lot of hard work off to the side, working on air, that sort of thing. Even when he was in the 11-on-11 periods that were not competitive, he was often wearing a penny that sort of functioned like a red injured player jersey. And so could he start on PUP? He could. If he doesn't, it wouldn't stun me, and we talked about this in the podcast before, if he didn't make the cut. Josh McDaniels, Mike Vrabel, they really have no ties to the guy, and if they felt good about where he was and his fit in this offense, would they have tried to invest as they did, as heavily as they did at that receiver position? Third-round pick at receiver, free agent signing at receiver in Stefon Diggs. Like, where do they see him fitting in? If they like Pop Douglas, they appear to like Kayshon Boutte, the way he was used in the spring. To me, he doesn't fit in just yet. You never know, injuries, his performance in the summer, that could change. But right now, it wouldn't stun me if he doesn't make the team. Maybe they could buy some time for him and buy some time for themselves to make a decision on him by starting him for the season on PUP. As far as Bourne goes, he looks fine to me. We haven't seen him used a bunch down the field. Those down the field targets have gone to, off the top of my head, Kayshon Boutte, Kyle Williams, those types. I've seen Javon Baker targeted down the field more than Bourne. But Patriots.com just posted a recent video from a mic'd up practice for Drake May. Thought it was a fun watch. You get a much better sense of how Drake May interacts with his teammates between plays, more so than I think anything we heard last year, if I am recalling correctly. So it's worth the watch. But you see him find Kendrick Bourne working sort of a elaborate red zone route that they had practiced earlier in the practice. I thought it was a good example of, a practice drill showing up in a competitive period. And it's such an extended play. You'll actually hear Drake May say something to the effect of, that might be a scramble drill type of situation, but stay alive for me back there, because he's working the back end line and ends up catching a touchdown from Drake May. I think he's looked good. The question to me is, do they like him better than Kayshon Boutte? Because again, let's go through the list. If Diggs is healthy and he's on the roster, if Mac Hollins is healthy, he's going to be on the roster also. Kyle Williams is going to be on the roster as a third-round pick. I believe Pop Douglas is going to be on the roster. That's 4. If they like Boutte over Bourne, now you're talking 5. And Bourne's your 6th guy and doesn't really play special teams. That's a difficult place to be. And that's not even to mention Efton Chisholm and where he might end up at the end of the summer. But it's a pretty, again, they've got a lot of NFL players. There's a lot of threes in there. So, is he a good enough 3 to be on this team? Does he end up as trade bait? He's been in a number of different trade discussions, it feels like, over the last 2 or 3 years. So let's see on Kendrick Bourne. Steve says, is there any part of the Diggs physical signing bonus timing related to waiting out the McLaurin situation? I don't think so. Part of the bonus has been paid to Diggs, I guess, based on how it's a $12 million signing bonus. He's gotten 4. He can get 8 more, obviously, at different points in time on the calendar. If he doesn't pass his physical and he ends up not on the team, they could come after the 4 that they gave him. I don't think they're waiting to give Diggs a physical before going after McLaurin. If they feel like they still need receiver help, you just got to go and do it now. Like, Diggs isn't stopping you from pursuing somebody else. He shouldn't be, because again, there's a lot of uncertainty with what he's going to, in my opinion, with what he's going to be able to produce. So to me, no. If they, and Mike Vrabel, I think, said it. He didn't mention the name Terry McLaurin, and our buddy Tom Curran did a good job of asking the question of Vrabel during the mandatory minicamp period. You see guys around the league, contract situations, holdouts. How closely do you pay attention to those? Are there calls being made? And Vrabel made it very clear. Yeah, we have to pay attention to those. We have to always be looking to improve our team. So given where they're at receiver, if they think Terry McLaurin might be available, they need to pursue him now. They don't need to wait for any kind of assessment of Stefon Diggs and his knee and his readiness for this season. The Action Awards. Oh boy, I have no idea what those are, and I can't really read the @ handle. But let's just assume the Action Awards are family friendly. He asks, or she asks, will Jack Conley make the team? It'll be an uphill battle. He's an undrafted rookie, right? Great size, and we've seen him play, in some pretty early groupings. We can put it that way, in terms of what we've seen out at practice. Jack Conley's undrafted rookie out of Boston College, 6'7", 330. 6'7", 330, I believe, off the top of my head, is the listing on Jack Conley. Let's see. Did he have it right, friends? He did. He was off by 3 pounds. 6'7", 333. So what is working in his favor is that left guard spot is still a real question. Is Cole Strange good enough, healthy enough to just have that job by the throat and not let it get anywhere? Center, to me, is still a little bit of a question. It looks like that is going to be Garrett Bradbury's job, but left guard still, in my opinion, up in the air. I would not put him as a leader in the clubhouse for it, and I wouldn't even put him in the leader of the club in the clubhouse as somebody who would be the primary backup. I'd be looking at somebody like Caden Wallace before Conley. I'd be looking at Jarrett Wilson if he's healthy before Conley to step in and take that role. Let's see in training camp. Is there any way Jared Wilson ends up winning the starting center job? Because Bradbury was just released by the Vikings, guys. Like, I don't know if he's their best option at center this year. I guess we'll find out this summer. Jared Wilson basically didn't participate in minicamp. He was there, but he's dealing with an injury and didn't do anything on the field 11-on-11 wise. If he ends up at center and Strange can't make it work at left guard, okay, now the thing really is open. And maybe it's Caden Wallace, but maybe that's where Jack Conley, is able to make a real run at the gig. So interesting player for sure. Let's see when the pads come on. 6'7", 333, the spring in shorts and t-shirts, not exactly your time to shine. Okay, Sox Nation asks, and God bless you, Sox Nation. It's been a weird week. Do you think the Patriots will make a point to throw mostly speedy edge rushers at Will Campbell come training camp, considering most of his downfalls seem to come against the quicker, more athletic rushers? It's an interesting question, Sox Nation, and I know what you're saying. Some of his college tape, you saw faster guys crashing hard inside on Will Campbell, and sometimes hard for him to mirror and stick with those guys. I think they're just going to throw their best guys at him because he's going to see small and fast. He's going to see big and strong. He's going to see big, strong, and fast. He's a left tackle in the NFL. Like, there's no hiding. And while they can help him, chips, doubles, different play calls Josh McDaniels can use to help him out, he's going to have to just be able to man up against the best of the best. And so what will you see in terms of matchups for Will Campbell in training camp? My guess is you'll see a lot of Keon White. You'll see a lot of Harold Landry. You'll see a lot of Kayvon Chason. I would say those have been the three guys we saw the most in these passing situations in passing camp this spring. Anthony Jennings in the run game, my guess is, will sort of elevate, and we'll see him a lot on early downs in training camp because he's good in that role. And I think Mike Vrabel will value that ability to stop the run, so you'll see some Anthony Jennings. But I think you're going to see a steady diet of all those different guys, and they all have different body types. Maybe even see some Milton Williams, because there are going to be some situations where Milton Williams is going to be locking horns with Will Campbell. Like, let's see that on one-on-ones. That would be all kinds of entertaining. We're going to be able to tell pretty quickly, just whether or not Will Campbell can survive at left tackle. And I think he can, and it looks like the Patriots are all in on it because that was the only position he played this spring. I've told you how I felt about him for a long time, going back to well before the draft. But again, one-on-ones, that's where, for good or bad, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, that's where you find out about these guys. And you get a really good sense for how they're able to hold up physically and what their physical abilities allow them to do at the pro level. So we'll see on Will Campbell and all of those different matchups. It'll be a lot of fun. What is a realistic expectation of Drake May this season? McRibbit, after we just did our whole Drake May thing, I did want to just reference, because again, Tom and I had a little back and forth. I said he was ridiculous for not projecting Drake May as being a better player in year two. He's got a different coordinator who I think has a proven track record with young talented quarterbacks to turn them into something and to get more out of them. The situation around him, both on the line and the pass catchers, has gotten better. It's still not good, as we just talked about, but it's gotten better. He's going to be better in year two. I feel very secure in saying that. And I pointed to one stat to say, like, we're talking about Drake May, and I'm lumping Karn into this group, even though it's sort of a bastardization of his take. Don't tell him. We're talking about Drake May like he's Jameis Winston. He threw 30 picks last year in 12 games. He had 15 touchdowns against 10 interceptions. It's not bad. He had a 3.0 interception rate, which is 1/10 of a percentage point less or worse than Tom Brady's first season as a starter. Tom Brady had a 2.9 interception rate in 2001. Drake May had a 3.0 interception rate in 2024. And Tom Brady was Mr. Game Manager, right? He was hands-on 10-2, don't screw it up. And he did it to the tune of a Super Bowl. So Tom comes back at me on Boston Sports Tonight behind my back. He says, well, Phil must have been in middle school wearing big glasses when Brady was compiling those numbers. The game has changed. The game has changed to the point where quarterbacks now have lower interception rates in general. And he's not wrong. I was not in middle school. I was a sophomore in high school. I was in Tommy Driscoll's basement. And we were having a hell of a time watching the Patriots win their first Super Bowl. And I did not have glasses, by the way. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Okay? I don't know why you had to throw that in there. Nothing wrong with glasses. Glasses can be sweet. But he's not wrong about the interception rate thing. 2.9 at this stage of the game, it's not very good. It's not going to get you near the top of the league. My point is, he's not as bad as you make him out to be. Because when the one number you reference, Tom and others, is that he won one game last year, you're kind of telling on yourself. That's not an incredibly deep dive into the level of production that Drake May brought to the table last year. So, the game has evolved. Interception rates don't necessarily tell you what they used to tell you. The exchange rate's a little different on those these days. And yes, I would say you're right. I can give you a more evolved stat, though, to tell you how good Drake May was last year. And it's ESPN's QBR. The reason I like this stat is because it compiles a lot of different stats into one number. And the number itself, I like this. This is good intuitive work by the ESPN analytics department. The number the QBR spits out at you, I think there are a lot of people who don't know this. The QBR number, so it's not quarterback rating. This is different. This is QBR, ESPN proprietary stat. The number you earn as a quarterback at the end of the season actually is a number that is designed to tell you the percentage of games your team would have won in a standard, average, representative, whatever adjective you want to use. Sort of let's use the word average just to make it easy to understand. In an average situation. So you're in a league average situation. You played the way you played as a quarterback. How many games would your team win based on your performance? And your performance includes things like rushing yards, but also third down performance and EPA. And the QBR uses a lot of different things. I would encourage you to go read about it if you care about it at all and you want to learn a little bit more about it. I think it is a valuable stat. Drake May last year was 17th in the NFL. And I think a pretty accurate representation of probably where he would slot based on his performance over the breadth of the season relative to other NFL quarterbacks. So he was about the 17th quarterback, best quarterback in the league. But his QBR put him just ahead of, right really there with Bo Nix. Slightly ahead of Bryce Young, slightly ahead of Geno Smith, significantly ahead of CJ Stroud, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson. Now we're getting to the bottom of the barrel. Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, in the little time he played. Gardner Minshew, Will Levis, those guys are at the very bottom. They have 32 quarterbacks here, by the way, who qualified. So Drake May's QBR was 58.6. So what QBR is trying to tell you is, again, I'm using the word average. In an average situation, Drake May's team would have won 58.6 of his games. In an 18-game season, that's about 10 wins. You take that. You would take that. Now, the guys at the top of the list who played out of their minds, in my opinion, sort of co-MVPs, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson was 1, Josh Allen was 2. They're both just over 77 QBR. So based on their performance, they're winning just slightly better than 3/4 of their games. Joe Burrow, not far off, 74.7 QBR. Jaden Daniels, oh boy. Not sure my Drake May versus Jaden Daniels take 3 years into their career is going to end up panning out. Where I said Drake May would ultimately be the better guy 3 years into their pro careers. Jaden Daniels, 70.6 as a rookie. terms of his QBR. So it's not the be-all, end-all. Like, there are some head-scratchers here for me. For example, Jordan Love had a QBR last year of 69.3, which was better than Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield. Maybe his season was just better. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I watched every Packers game. I just didn't think Jordan Love was a top 5 quarterback last year, and that's where QBR has him ranked. But now we're getting pretty far afield. Just to bring it back to Drake May and my expectations for him, because that was the question, realistic expectation for Drake May from McRibbit. I think it's to be slightly better than where he was QBR-wise last season. So, to me, he was 17 last year. Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Sam Darnold, all ahead of him, just ahead of him. Can he not leapfrog all those guys? Of course he can. Can he even get into a tier of Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, 13 and 12, respectively, in QBR last year? I don't see why not. I really don't. Outside of the fact that his weapons aren't as good. But this QBR is trying to analyze these quarterbacks almost in a vacuum. It's impossible to do because their production is based on the production that they're getting and the performances that they're getting from their receivers and their coordinators and their offensive lines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really hard to just isolate these guys. But in my opinion, realistic expectation, he should be sniffing somewhere in the range of top 12. He should be better than 17 in QBR. Let's put it that way. I'm not saying he should be in the top 10. I'm not saying he has to be inside the top 12. He should be right around there, though. Should be sniffing that. That, to me, is realistic. And then imagine what he might end up if you actually give him better receivers. If you give him a better complement of weapons. If you can really shore up that offensive line with 1 or 2 more pieces. I think, again, I'm on record on Drake May many times over. I think they have a special talent on their hands. It's just a question of what they can give him. A couple more questions here. Todd, with the Pats offseason going the way it did and preseason going the way it is, most people are encouraged by this team. Does this make your job less or more fun than the past 3 seasons? My job's always fun. It's always interesting. The mood around the team obviously changes depending on the performance of the team. I really try not to let it impact my mood all that much. I think the nature of the questions you're asking become more difficult when the team is performing badly, whether it's in a 1-week time frame or a 18-week time frame, right? Even if you cover a great team, there's going to be losses and maybe some really difficult and really almost inexplicable losses that are going to require you to ask questions that the people you're asking them to don't necessarily want to hear. And believe me, got more than enough experience with that, having covered Bill Belichick at the end and the players in that locker room. But different people handle it different ways, and we've been fortunate that we have dealt with a number of fantastic pros over the course of many years of covering this team. From Matthew Slater to Devin McCourty to David Andrews to even Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo was, last year was a bad season on the field for the New England Patriots, which they knew it was going to be. But in terms of asking him questions, it was really, there was never any ill will or poison coming from the podium. And I think that's hard to do when the season is as difficult as it was last year. Alex Van Pelt, tremendous pro, incredibly accountable, would take a tough question about his play calling or how a certain guy was used or, why they weren't using Drake May this way or what happened on that route that didn't seem to make sense. And he'd give you chapter and verse on why it happened and why it went poorly and how he's going to try to do it better. So dealing with people like that allows what is already a fun job no matter what. And I always know how blessed and how fortunate I am to have the job that I have. But having those types of people in the building who can share insight with us so that we can share it with you, because so many of you live and die with how this team performs on a weekly basis. And we totally, having grown up here and lived it myself, I can totally appreciate that. And I understand you want information. You want to know why. And you can handle it. And we are so lucky to have the fan base that we have and the intelligent fan base that we have, because you understand yourselves why things went poorly, and we can dig much deeper than I think maybe other people covering other teams can at times. And that's because of the people that we are producing content for, because that's what you demand. Thank God. So the job is always fun, to answer your question. Is it more fun when people are encouraged and when the expectations are better? I think it's what is more fun? Interacting with the fans. When you guys are more excited about the team, I think that can in turn make our jobs more exciting. That's something that I can certainly acknowledge. When it's 4-win season after 4-win season and there ain't a lot of answers and there ain't a lot of avenues toward improving the thing, those interactions are not as enjoyable. So I'm having fun this offseason, and I think it's going to be a fascinating year, and it's going to be fun for me, again, no matter what. I love the job, good or bad, in terms of the results on the field for the Patriots, but I think it's going to be a lot more fun for fans. Quality Smoke asking, with the exception of LG, what's the weakest area of the team? Really quickly, Quality Smoke, one of our favorites, one of our best commenters. I think it's center. Garrett Bradbury, let's keep a close eye on that position when the pads come on in training camp. And let's keep a close eye on how the rookie performs, if he's able to perform, Jarrett Wilson. Because I think that could end up being a battle that we're not really thinking about now, but we might be thinking about in a few weeks. This is the last one from Bill Mack. Marathon pod here yet again. I think you do a bang-up job with your next Pats and Tom Curran's podcast. Thank you, Bill. Would love to... This is really... that. Now everybody knows why I picked this question. Would love to know more about your approach to the podcast and how you go about it. All right, so Bill Mack wants to understand how the podcast game goes. First of all, Bill, appreciate you for assuming that there is a set approach. Like I'm sitting in the chair with a well laid out, detailed to the nth degree type of plan that I'm just ready to fire at you over the course of 45 minutes to an hour. Not always the case. A lot of times, the way I look at it is I'm preparing for the next Pats podcast all throughout the week. Starting, if it's in season, starting on Sunday through Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever we end up recording it. When you're on the beat and when you're trying to participate at every press conference and you're trying to get to the locker room multiple times a week and you're at every game, obviously, and we're talking about it every night on TV, multiple podcasts, on the radio, like just so lucky to be able to think about this team as often as I am. That to me is oftentimes the prep. And there will be moments throughout the course of those 4 or 5 days where I think to myself, that would be a good thing to focus on next Pats. Let's try to pull a thread from that and see what we can get out of it and see if there is something we can attack on a little deeper level and talk about it on the pod. Or, you know what? We need to figure out something more about X particular player. And so let's make sure we reach out to somebody from that player's background and let's figure out what makes this guy tick. Or let's talk to the guy himself. And we have the opportunity to do that so often, just by getting into the locker room and reserving some time with someone and getting, five good minutes with somebody. That to me is incredibly valuable, that we have the ability to be boots on the ground. And you'll notice, like this time of year, we're not hammering you over the head with interviews. Everybody's off. Everybody in the NFL is off for sure. College guys, they're always recruiting and they're always working. But they can be a little bit tougher to wrangle this time of year too. And so we're trying to come up with some evergreen topics, things like the 3 Ps series that we're going to do. And we'll attack this part of the calendar that way. But in season, it's whatever strikes me as something that might strike you, Bill, and others as interesting. And try to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe it's a question that comes up on TV, on Early Edition, And it's the type of thing that you might answer for 30 seconds in the moment, but it gets you thinking. And you stew on it overnight. You sleep on it. You wake up the next day. It continues to be something you want to spend some time on. That's the kind of thing that you could tell yourself would play as a podcast topic. But it's just about coming in here. We've got fantastic facilities here, the Boston Media Center. We have our own dedicated podcast room. This is still relatively, it's beautiful. We've been coming at you from this thing for months now. But boy, what an improvement over coming at you from somewhere in my house, one of my kids' rooms, or in our basement. Legos all over the floor behind me. The sports closet in the back is ajar because there's, a metal bat and with a donut on it, knocking the thing over, the bucket of balls half tipped over in there. That's just, it's a little chaotic at home. So to be able to come here, sit in a nice quiet room, beautiful lighting, fantastic. I'm not sure what this is, but I picked this picture today. Hydrate. It's going to be hot out there, everybody. Remember to hydrate. I think that maybe was subconsciously what I was trying to tell people out there. But boy, we just get so much help from everybody in the building here. John the Skull Crusher, Henry, is our fearless leader. But, when it comes to editing these podcasts down, it could be anybody from Annie Hall to Adam JC to Casey Keene to John himself. And we just have so much help from all the directors in the building here to be able to set us up nicely for the light. Lord knows if I was in charge of the lighting and the camera angle and the focus there, your boy would be struggling. So that's a huge part of the behind the scenes, how the podcast game works, Bill. You need a great team. We've got a fantastic team here at NBC Sports Boston. So much help in terms of putting these things together. And I can't tell you how important they are to me because, again, it ain't the quickest thing in the world to put together a podcast where the guy is just spouting off at the mouth for the better part of an hour and a half about off-season football topics. It ain't easy. So we appreciate those people so much, and that's how this thing ends up coming to you. One behind-the-scenes thing. I don't know if you can see this right now. I'm rocking sneaks with the button down. Oftentimes, I'm kind of like business up top, very casual on the bottom. We are wearing pants. Actually, not even technically pants right now, but I'm wearing shorts. Gonna go try to sweat for a few minutes before we go on TV later tonight. But that's a little behind the scene because you only get me from basically the sternum up here on the Next Pats podcast. That's a little behind the scenes nugget as well. You can just always imagine, if you cared to do that, what might be happening from the waist down. It's appropriate. It is appropriate, but I'm gonna go try to be an athlete after the pod. So I'm looking a little athletic on the bottom half. All right, we've crossed over into the realm of the too much information, and so that's as good a time as any to end the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As always, please leave your comments. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a comment there. Leave us a rating. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up button. Our YouTube family, please continue to do that. Continue to support the pod, even in the off season, so we can continue to give you the best product humanly possible. We'll be coming at you with another 3Ps podcast next week, so keep an eye out for that. We'll talk to you then.